Hey y'all, how you doing? It's Nick. I'm very excited because Arturia V Collection 8 just launched on Splice Rent to Own. So I thought this would be a great time to break down the different types of synthesis since Arturia's V Collection has a lot of these legendary and historic synthesizers. Now, before we dive into all these different types, let's make sure we have a good fundamental understanding of how a synthesizer works. In its purest form, sound synthesis is the process of using electronics to create an electrical pressure sound wave from scratch and then control and modify that sound wave. So the key thing here is electricity. And as electricity became more widely available in the early 20th century, we saw the invention of instruments like the telharmonium, the theremin, and the Hammond organ. These instruments ultimately paved the way for the first commercially popular synthesizer designed by American engineer Robert Moog. The Mini Moog was the first synthesizer to be sold in music stores, and this is our first form of synthesis, subtractive synthesis. All subtractive synthesis breaks down into three main components. The components are the controllers, the sound source, and the modifiers. The controllers are the parts that the musician actually uses, so that's the keyboard, the pitch bend wheel, the mod wheel, and any other sustain pedals or MPE hardware. The sound source are the actual oscillators themselves, and the term oscillator simply refers to the actual electrical signal bouncing back and forth, hence oscillating, generally in a sine or square wave. So the oscillators will then feed into the third section, the modifiers. The modifiers will include filters and other effects that process the incoming oscillator sound before we hear our final output. So to recap, subtractive synthesis is essentially the process of taking harmonically rich sound sources, like this saw wave, and subtracting the frequencies using filters to make a more refined tone. It's important to note that this workflow exists in the other types of synthesizers we're going to talk about in this video, and that the other types of synthesis really differentiate mainly in the oscillator section where the sound itself is being generated. So the next type of synthesis we're going to talk about is additive synthesis. What if I told you that all sounds could be recreated by combining sine waves? In the physical world, the sounds we hear are actually the sum of a bunch of different sine waves resonating at different amplitudes and frequencies. With the emergence of digital technologies and computers in the 70s and 80s, new instruments were also born, including the Fairlight CMI. While the CMI was a full-fledged DAW and has sampling capabilities, its synthesizer engine was an additive synthesizer. How do you use an additive synthesizer to actually stack up all those sine waves? The answer is called FFT, or fast Fourier transform. It's essentially a method for translating a signal from the time or space domain to the frequency domain and allows us to sound design using additive synthesis. Did you know Operator and Serum also have FFT capabilities? So in the CMIV, I've got the spectral synth tab open, and this is the additive synth. If I trigger a note, I can hear this sine wave, and you can see by this one that this is the first sine wave. If I want to hear the other sine waves, they're actually also known as harmonics or fundamentals. We can move the center. So this is the second, an octave. And what you notice is as we get higher in these values, it's not necessarily octave jumps. They follow the harmonic series. Now listen as we increase the spread, which is adding these simultaneously. So these are all just sine waves we just heard. And we're increasing kind of the amplitude as they come in. And you can hear it gets as a richer, more like a saw or a square type tone. And while additive synthesis might not be the most intuitive for designing a sound from scratch, I think it's a great way to add subtle changes to a patch you've already been working on. Our next form of synthesis, frequency modulation, was also born in the digital era. The concept was invented by John Chowning, who patented the technology to Yamaha, which eventually found its way to the very popular DX7. FM synthesis involves an oscillator's pitch being modulated by another oscillator. Listen to how this sine wave's pitch gets modulated by this other oscillator. It slowly starts as a vibrato type sound, but as you get more modulator signal, the sound starts to get richer in timbre. So the key thing to understand in FM synthesis, the oscillators, or what we refer to as operators in FM synthesis, interact with each other. So FM synthesis becomes very powerful when you have many operators. The last key component to FM sound design is how these operators interact with each other, which we sometimes refer to as the algorithm. This is going to bring us to the last form of synthesis we're covering in this video, wavetable synthesis. This involves the periodic reproduction of single cycle waveforms. The oscillators each have a table of these waveforms to access and can play back any point in the waveform and even morph between the waveforms themselves. Software instruments like Massive, Serum, and Pigments really pushed wavetable synthesis to new heights. These instruments even allow you to import your own audio files and convert them into wavetables. Well, I hope you all enjoyed the video. Definitely check out V Collection 8 in the description. You can try for free for a few days. Let us know in the comments if there's any other type of synthesis that you would like us to take a deeper dive into. I cannot believe the year is almost over. I hope everyone enjoys the rest of your holiday, and I'll see everyone next time. Later, y'all.